Okay, Carol Doe, are we ready to begin with the public meeting presentation?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good morning. A special week, and we'll go ahead and go into more details about why this is special. Once we get through our public meeting, we're going to start today off with the launch of the FY21-26 six-year improvement program COVID-19 update virtual public meeting. I just want to remind everyone who is with us this morning that the special session with the General Assembly ended on November 9th. Governor Northam signed the budget on November 18th. We presented a draft presentation to you last month. This morning, we're presenting to you the program, and it's going to be presented by Kim Pryor, who's Director of Infrastructure and Investment. And with that, Ms. Pryor, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Secretary, members of the board. I'm going to start the public meeting by just giving a little bit of background and information on the purpose for the public meeting. For any members of the public or stakeholders wishing to go ahead and get queued up and call in, the phone number to call is posted on the CTV website as well as the fall meeting website. Next slide, please.
Hey, Terry. Terry?
Due to the impact of the global pandemic, the normal processes we typically go through to update the six-year program have been adjusted. As you know, normally the board holds a series of public meetings in each district in the fall and spring of each year as part of the six-year program annual update. At this time, the COVID pandemic makes it impractical and unsafe to meet in person, and so we are holding this meeting virtually. Next slide, please.
Ms. Pryor, hold on one second. I just want to make sure that everyone is muted. And Carol, I wonder if we could call Mr. Merrill. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. Due to the uncertainties created by the pandemic and its impact on the transportation revenues, the annual update of the six-year program was delayed. We sought budget flexibility during the 2020 special session to support a more focused FY21 to 26 six-year program update. As the Secretary mentioned, the General Assembly special session ended on November 9th, and Governor Northam signed the budget on November 18th. The approved budget includes certain provisions providing flexibility related to virtual public meetings, the six-year improvement program, as well as mitigating impacts of the revenue reductions resulting from the pandemic. During this unprecedented time, we are striving to be as efficient as possible, and our goal continues to be to keep projects moving on time and on budget. Next slide. The fall and spring meetings normally provide an opportunity to provide feedback on the six-year program update, and it's also an opportunity to highlight projects with an estimated cost greater than $25 million that are being proposed for addition to the six-year program as required by code. This six-year program update, as I said previously, is a focused update. We are not undertaking all of the steps we would normally do as part of an update. So this six-year program update is limited to actions on revenue sharing projects as permitted by the budget flexibility to address the COVID-related revenue reductions. The actions do not reduce any existing funding commitments to projects or delay existing project schedule. This update will also include the addition of newly selected state of good repair, local, and VDOT bridges, as well as the addition of newly selected revenue sharing projects using FY25 through 26 allocations. Next slide. This slide shows a list of the roughly 13 projects proposed to be added to the six-year program that have an estimated cost greater than $25 million. This list is also posted online at the fall meeting website. Next slide. This table just shows the number of revenue sharing projects impacted by the strategy to adjust allocations that were provided previously and provide them in a later fiscal year. These funding actions were presented to the board in October, you'll recall, and that these adjustments will be modified somewhat as we finalize the 6-year program based on project activity that's occurred in the previous several months. However, no project schedules will be delayed and no funding commitments will be reduced. Next slide. This is just some logistic information about the virtual public meeting. Information can be viewed online at the fall meeting website. Comments will be taken until December 3rd. Comments can be submitted online at the fall meeting website shown there on the slide. They can also be emailed into VDOT or DRPP at those 2 email addresses shown, or we still take old-fashioned posted mail to the addresses shown on the slide. Next slide. And lastly, we will be taking comments by phone today. So anyone wishing to provide comments to the board should dial in the number shown on the slide and enter the PIN. And then individuals will be called in the order in which they called to speak in the order in which they called in. We would ask that callers limit their comments to 3 minutes. And that concludes my presentation, Madam Secretary. I'll turn it back over to you for any other comments or to start calling on potential commenters.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Ms. Mathis, do we have any callers today?
I am checking now, Madam Secretary.
Morning, I can speak to that. This is the public call-in bridge. I do have one public caller on the line, Katie Shannon. If you're ready to make comment, we are ready to do that now.
Welcome, Katie Shannon. You're welcome to speak.
Yes, good morning. I appreciate this opportunity. Again, my name is Katie Shannon with the City of Virginia Beach. I was just calling in reference to the revenue sharing applications or reallocations. Virginia Beach has concerns with the reallocation of previously appropriated revenue sharing funding. To date, there have been no opportunities for local government staff to participate in discussions about the revenue sharing funding changes, of which the locality has a 50% funding stake. Although we do have some schedule modifications that may allow us to accept the proposed changes referenced in the November 16, 2020 letter, we do have several projects that will not be able to meet their construction commitments if the program funding remains as shown. Like most localities in Virginia, the City of Virginia Beach is required by city code to appropriate 100% of the necessary funds prior to advertising a project for construction. Funding cannot be programmed during construction or after construction ends in order to award a contract. We recognize that both VDOT and the city are facing unprecedented times due to the fiscal impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. With this in mind, it is even more imperative that we communicate about potential funding and schedule changes. The use of the project data that is over 7 months old further exacerbates the problem. Appreciate the opportunity to provide comments this morning and your continued support with helping us deliver our transportation program. Thank you.
All right. And while that comment was being made, we did have a couple more join.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shannon, and I will turn it over to you to, just invite citizens to speak. Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. And while that comment was being made, we did have a couple more join. I see we have caller ending in 86. If you would like to address the board, now's the time. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. But you're free to go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hope you can hear me okay. This is Chip Boyles with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission and the Charlottesville Albemarle MPO. Chair Ballantyne, CTB members, DRPT and VDOT staff, thank you for allowing us to comment on this year's 6-year improvement plan. Very quickly, I'm here to express support of the proposed 6-year improvement plan as submitted by DRPT. This plan is very well designed, fully utilizing the resources available to the Commonwealth and to local transit providers with local, state, federal, and CARES Act funds. Knowing that we all are working from reduced budget, this plan allows transit services to address immediate operating and capital needs as much as possible. And especially for our region, it works towards a pipeline of future and increased and innovative services to grow our transit network, taking advantage of our future transportation opportunities. Your support of the Afton Express in the Stanton and Culpeper districts and your support of new services and visioning in the Charlottesville-Albemarle area are perfect examples of this forward thinking. The Charlottesville-Albemarle MPO and the Central Virginia Regional Transit Partnership are in solid support of these efforts and the Commonwealth 6-year improvement plan. Though not ready for the current 6-year plan, our region also supports the work DRPT is doing on the east-west rail improvements and expansion from Clifton Forge through Charlottesville to Doswell, with Charlottesville hosting one of the busiest Amtrak stops in Virginia, but through an outdated, overcapacity, and also privately leased station. We look forward to seeing rail capital improvements for the Charlottesville station in future state improvement plans. Thank you again for allowing us to comment.
Thank you, Chip. Would you mind spelling your last name for us, please?
Glad to. It's Boyles.
Thank you, Mr. Boyles. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, and next on our queue, we have caller ending in 83. If you'd like to address the board, now's the opportunity for that. Please try to limit your comments to the 3-minute mark, please. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is John Bishop with Frederick County. I'm the transportation planner here at the county. Just wanted to take a minute to reemphasize, of course, you're focused on the secondary plan today, the 6-year improvement program, but as we look forward to our pending revenue sharing applications, I would like to particularly call out not one, but 2 applications that are pending for the exit 317 on Route 11 North here in Frederick County, just north of Winchester. That has become very rapidly a very critical area for us, and I just appreciate any attention that can be given to those applications. Regarding revenue sharing, we are supportive of the solution that has been put forward. Kim Cameron, in particular, who we've been coordinating with in the Stanton district, has been very helpful in kind of guiding us through and letting us know that that's not going to slow our active projects down, which we're very appreciative of. We look forward to delivering those. And finally, as he goes off the board, I would just like to thank again Dixon Whitworth for all his time and energy over his number of years of service, as well as welcome in our new CTB member that was announced last Friday, I believe, Mr. Mark Merrill. Thank you all for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I'd like to align my thoughts with yours. We all are very, very grateful to Mr. Whitworth, and thank you so much for your call.
Right, and next on the queue is caller ending in 74. If you'd like to address the board, now is the opportunity to do that. I will give you a heads up that you are muted, so make sure that you press *6 to unmute before addressing us. And if you're ready, now is the opportunity to speak to the board. And that is *6 to unmute.
All right. Am I unmuted now? This is John Magruder with the Essex County Board of Supervisors. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I would like to comment on the bridges on the 6-year plan. I appreciate the bridges in our area needing repair. A lot of them are underweight and need repair. Agriculture and forestry are the most important economic drivers of our areas. So I would encourage VDOT to continue to study and look at underweight bridges that are in need of repair to be added to that 6-year plan if there is funding available. And I appreciate all that they're doing in the Fredericksburg district to repair these poor condition bridges and structurally underweight bridges. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and next on the queue, we have caller ending in 84. If you'd like to address the board, please do so now, and remember to try to limit your comments to the 3-minute mark, please.
Good morning. This is Trip Pollard with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and I'd like to make some brief remarks. We'll follow up with more detailed written comments. Chairman Valentine, CTV members, other state officials, first of all, we appreciate all you're doing to address the unprecedented challenges presented by the pandemic. Given time available, I'd like to mainly touch on a few key themes and projects. Of particular importance, we strongly support recent steps towards creating a more sustainable, resilient transportation system, but we need to move farther and faster in this direction since transportation is by far Virginia's leading source of greenhouse gas emissions. Fundamental transportation planning and project evaluation steps still are not being taken. We appreciate 2 VDOT pilot programs moving forward and may finally address this gap, but as of today, that gap remains, and we don't even have a ballpark sense of the greenhouse gas impacts of the revised 6-year plan under consideration. We need better carbon accounting and greenhouse gas performance metrics. Secondly, greatly support the provisions for transit and rail in this plan, but we do need to do more to shift to provide more equitable, cleaner transportation choices, particularly in implementing the I-81 and I-95 corridor improvement studies and the 664 corridor study. There are some excellent proposals, again, in the revised 6-year plan, such as the Transforming Rail in Virginia program, which we strongly support, but again, need further shift. And we appreciate the Secretary's creation of a working group to look at vehicle electrification, but we need more funding in this 6-year plan and elsewhere to electrify transit and steps such as providing chargers on interstate corridors for medium-duty and heavy-duty vehicles. We also strongly support SMARTSCALE and other efforts to make sure we're spending our dollars more wisely with a focus on maintenance and good repair. Finally, there are some projects we do have concern with. The Martinsville Southern Connector, a new very costly highway running parallel to Route 220 that would harm many wetlands, streams, and forests. VDOT itself has identified improvements and upgrades in the Route 220 arterial preservation plan released last year that are far less destructive and more effective. Bowers Field study, which has been recently expanded, we are concerned about its impacts on carbon sinks, especially in this vulnerable location in Hampton Roads. 495 American Legion Bridge, we strongly support improvements to both. Both projects, though, do need to be sure we have significant transit investment as a component. And then finally, the largest proposed new funding in the revised 6-year plan, $174 million, is for the Corridor Q Poplar Creek phase, which unfortunately this builds on another phase which is under construction. There were less destructive alternatives that would have saved more carbon sinks that were not pursued. So I'd like to end where I began. Thank you for all that you do, but we've got to do a better job still of pursuing less destructive, cleaner, more equitable projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pollard.
All right, next on the queue, caller ending in 65. If you'd like to address the board, now is the opportunity to do that.
Do we have someone there?
Yes, this is Terry Cox from Lee County, Virginia. Just a citizen. I just want to call in quickly to thank the board and the state for what they're doing with our highways. And my concern is US 58 Powell Mountain. We need to continue to make the commitments for the pacing lanes across the mountain. We have a giant federal prison on the west side of the mountain at the foot with multi-lane highways. And on the east side of Powell Mountain, we have a giant industrial park at Dustfield with multi-lanes. And the middle is a 2-lane road across Powell Mountain. And we just need to be committed to continue to get pacing lanes across the mountain. And thank you all for what you do, and have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, and have a good Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving to you.
All right, moving along. Caller ending in 70. If you'd like to address the board, now's your opportunity to do so. Please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And I will give you the heads up that you are muted. It is *6 to unmute.
Thank you. This is Stuart Schwartz, Executive Director of the Coalition for Smarter Growth. Thank you, Chair Valentine and members of the CTD. I'd like to echo others who have complimented you all on your COVID pandemic response. It's been extremely important and a great job on your all's part, particularly your investment in keeping transit going. We have seen how critical transit, especially bus transit, is for our essential workers. Thank you as well for our very strong national leading rail program, including the Long Bridge, as well as the other corridors. Thank you as well for your focus here, both in the restructuring earlier this year of the program and in with today's program, the approach focused on fixing it first, fixing our bridges. Certainly we need to make bridges and roads and our transit systems all more resilient. It will be helpful to know what the total cost is going to be to make them more resilient in an age of climate change and heavier rain events, sea level rise, and flooding, because we could easily spend all of our resources just on that, which may be what we have to do. To echo Mr. Pollard's comments, we very much want a program that is going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and that's not just about electrification, of which transit should be the first priority in electrification, but it's about reducing vehicle miles traveled. I want to commend you the report from Smart Growth America, Driving Down Emissions, as a reference for you all. It very much mirrors what the Coalition for Smarter Growth and other partners in Virginia have long called for. We need an integrated set of solutions from the state, working with local government, that links land use and transportation to reduce vehicle miles traveled, to reduce the amount we have to drive. We need affordable housing close to transit and jobs, again, to reduce the amount we have to drive, and recognizing that affordable housing has many co-benefits. And our economic development program has to focus on location efficiency and not spreading out our economic development investments. We have to put accessibility, proximity, ahead of just moving around at long distances. In that regard, we'd like to see, instead of extended linear investments, packages of investment in walkable transit-oriented community, transit-oriented development packages of investment. Road expansion has its limitations, as we've learned. Induced demand is an extremely important problem. It undermines major investments in expansion. Therefore, we should be looking at demand reduction and more targeted safety improvements. This applies to your arterial programs. We are deeply concerned about Route 15 North, which is now being funded, yes, by local and Northern Virginia regional dollars, but VDOT needs to have a say in these roads, because these expanded roads are being put onto your maintenance balance sheet that you have to handle. Therefore, we're looking for lower costs, lower impact, safer traffic calming alternatives for rural arterials. The same is true with urban and suburban arterials. They also need to be not overscaled. They should be more pedestrian and friendly and transit accessible. In that regard, we're still concerned about the Route 1 expansion in Northern Virginia. Finally, given the fight for climate change, given the needs in our state, we want to see a continued shift in funding to transit as critical for economic development, smart growth, and of sustainable growth in our Commonwealth to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Swartz, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
All right, and finally on the queue, caller ending in 28. If you'd like to address the board, now's the opportunity to do that. Please limit your comments to the 3-minute mark, and also it is *6 to unmute.
Is someone there?
Looks like our final caller is still muted. That's *6 to unmute, caller ending in 28.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Yes, this is Melody Foster with the Commonwealth Regional Council. Good morning, Secretary Valentine and members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. On behalf of the Commonwealth Regional Council, we would like to support 2 SMARTSCALE projects, one in Prince Edward, the 460 East Interchange project, and in Cumberland County, the Route 4560 project. Both of these projects support safety as well as they will improve economic development in these regions. And we just want to send our support. I didn't hear anything today about the reflection of the budget on SMARTSCALE projects being funded, and did hope to hear more about that. So thank you for allowing these comments.
Thank you, Melody Foster. You know, there are very few virtual meetings where I'm not able to see you.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do this from home, so it's a little more complicated.
Yeah, to hear your voice. Is there anyone
nice,
else?
Nice hearing you too.
We did have one more caller while that comment was being made join, caller ending in 23. We are trying to limit our comments to 3 minutes, but if you'd like to address the board, now is the opportunity to do that. Go ahead. I believe they have muted themselves. Caller ending in 23. *6
Yes,
to unmute.
good morning. Yes, can you hear me?
Sure.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to first, this is Jordan Miles. I'm a member of the Buckingham County Board of Supervisors. Also proudly serve on the Commonwealth Regional Council, where Melody Foster exudes her leadership with us, and also serve on the Virginia Tobacco Commission. So good morning to you all, and I'd like to thank the Commonwealth Transportation Board along with DRPT and VDOT staff for all their hard work in these unprecedented trying times with regards to COVID-19 and what it's done to our budgets statewide and on the county levels. We've all seen that and felt that. I do want to add that that the budget, in terms of what's being proposed, it looks like to me it's very fiscally responsible. I do have interest in some SMARTSCALE projects, and with regards to Cumberland County safety and economic development improvements at the intersection of Route 60 and 45 there in Cumberland County, and also in Prince Edward County, the US Route 460 East Interchange. Those would really offer not only safety improvements, but some economic development opportunities as well, especially the Prince Edward US Route 460 East Interchange. And being from Buckingham County, rural Virginia, I do thank you all for the attention y'all are putting on rural Virginia, but we could always use more in terms of spreading that attention and those dollars. We have very unique opportunities and challenges in rural Virginia, and so I'll thank you all for continuing to address those in the future. Secretary, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Great to have you with us this morning. Jordan, is there anybody else? Oh, Justin, I'm sorry, Justin Floyd.
That concludes the queue that I have here. Actually, let me take that right back. We've had someone call in just this moment. Caller ending in 7 excuse me, 3-7. If you'd like to make public comment, now's the time to address the board. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. This is Doug Stanley, County Administrator for Prince Edward County, formerly with Warren County. I wanted to express my support of the 460 interchange project here in Prince Edward County. And I also like to express a heartfelt thanks to CTB board member Dixon Whitworth for all his years of service on the CTB, and welcome my good friend Mark Merrill to the CTB. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comments today.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your work.
All right, and with that, that is the end of the public comment queue.
Okay, Justin, I just would like to say, for those who are listening and to the board members, Justin Floyd has been managing the call-in line this morning. And Justin, I want to say what an excellent job you have done. So thank you so much for that. And I thank everyone for just being patient as we are managing technology today. So with that, Carol, we'll move over to our workshop. I will say that, you know, public comments are welcome. Ms. Pryor, what is the deadline for people getting comments to us? Either emailing us online or through traditional mail. What is the deadline?
It's December 3rd.
We'll be taking comments. I was speaking with the gentleman earlier this morning, and he was concerned that he might not be able to call in this morning. So we will welcome your comments and make them a part of the official records. As we were listening to comments, I just want everyone to know that, again, we're living through this unprecedented time, and we are trying to address an $870 million deficit through FY22 by managing our resources and our allocations. And I'm grateful to the governor and the General Assembly for allowing us to have this budget flexibility just over the biennium, just for 2 years, so that we're able to maintain our current pipeline of projects, actually putting dollars to work on projects that are allocated funds in the early years, but do not require those funds until the latter years, years 3, 4, 5, and 6, using those dollars today to make sure that we are keeping all of our projects in the pipeline on time and on schedule. It is a cash management solution that is allowing us to maintain that stability, maintaining the projects, maintaining our workforce, and doing what we can to contribute to economic recovery and growth. That is the intention behind these decisions, completely transparent. And so anyway, we really appreciate everyone's help in helping us manage this process. So with that, Carol, I will adjourn the public meeting. And we will move over to ETB meeting. And prior to turning this over to Ms. DeTonk, I did want to let the board know, number one, that Mary Hines and Greg Gates have been reappointed to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, which I know makes everyone very, very happy. Greg Gates representing rural at large, and Mary Hines, Northern Virginia. They have played and continue to play a critical role for us. And so Mary and Greg, I just say thank you for saying yes. I did call them and say thank you for doing that. The reappointments were announced on Friday. And I also would like to let you know that we have a new board member joining us this morning, Mr. Mark Merrill. I will tell you, Mr. Merrill, the board, just a great partner for all of us has been Dixon Whitworth. Just so smart and so engaging. and how he speaks of you is just really remarkable. Your reputation precedes you, and we are thrilled to have you. I will let the board know that Mr. Merrill was most recently CEO and president of Valley Health Systems over in Winchester. He also served as president of Texas Health Presbyterian in Dallas. He was EVP of Texas Health Resources and co-chaired their electronic health record implementation. And being married to a cardiologist, Mr. Merrill, I will tell you that I know how important and significant that job is. You have spent time in DC. You have extensive experience in healthcare systems, operations, policy, contracting, business development, insurance, and financial performance, which will make my team extremely happy. We are just so pleased to have you. And I know that you have lived through some technical challenges this morning, but I welcome you on behalf of the board. And is there anything you would like to share with us this morning?
Well, hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yes, thank you. I apologize with my delay and logging on. I was having the visual, but not the audio. It's a real honor to be appointed to this board, and Madam Secretary. Obviously, Dixon Whitworth has been a trailblazer and someone I've known for many years and was involved with my coming to Valley Health 11 years ago. So I look forward to being of some service and certainly honored to be part of this august group. As I have read each of your bios and the experience you bring, I'm humbled to be part of this wonderful organization. Look forward to serving the Commonwealth and the citizens of Virginia.
Mr. Merrill, I will tell you that as great as the bios are, actually being with the people who serve on this board in person is the best experience. So we'll look forward to that opportunity. In fact, I think the only questionable trait on your resume is the fact that you're a Tar Heel.
That is a true statement. So, but I'm also very fond of the Virginia Cavaliers. Our daughter went to graduate school at UVA, so we have mixed loyalties with North Carolina.
Very, very good. So anyway, welcome aboard. And with that, Mr. Tunk, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. In light of the continuing state of emergency declared by Governor Northam, where it is impractical or unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, I move that we adopt this agenda to take action to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue the operation of the Commonwealth Transportation Board.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And with that, Ms. Mathis, will you call the roll?
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Tunk. Yes. Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes. Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Kasperowitz.
Mr. Kasperowitz?
He's been going in and out of the meeting. I think he's got a bandwidth issue.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Mathis.
Mr. Malbin?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Stinson?
Yes.
Dr. Smoot?
Aye.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
The roll's complete.
Hey, Carol,
Yes.
I think Bert answered for Mr. Johnson earlier.
This is Mr. Johnson. I'm a yes.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shep.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Ms.
Shep.
Matthews, did we get Mr. Merrill?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes, I.
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roper.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Secretary Valentine and members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. My name is Nicholas Roper, District Project Development Engineer in the Northern Virginia District. The purpose of this presentation is to discuss pending agreements between the federal government and the Commonwealth that are necessary for the Arlington National Cemetery Southern Expansion Project. Next slide. You will recall from the Army's earlier presentation in September that the Southern Expansion Project adds approximately 40 acres of new space for internments and inurnments to extend the life of the cemetery. The shaded area in the lower right of the satellite image of the cemetery shows where the expansion occurs adjacent to Route 27, Washington Boulevard, I-395, and Route 244, Columbia Pike. Next slide. A component of the Southern Expansion Project is a Defense Access Road, or DAR project, which realigns Columbia Pike, eliminating the current loop, and modifies the interchange at Columbia Pike and Washington Boulevard by replacing the cloverleaf configuration on the west side of the interchange with a tight half-diamond configuration to provide space for the expansion of the cemetery. Next slide. The CTB has already completed several actions related to this project earlier this spring. Two other agreements are the subject of today's briefing. One is authorization for the Commissioner to enter into a coordination agreement with the Army, FHWA Eastern Federal Lands, and Arlington County. The other is authorization for the Commissioner to enter into an agreement with the U.S. government for the relocation and alteration of existing facilities, which includes the terms for the conveyance of land between the parties. Our plan is to present both of these agreements to the CTB for action in December. Copies of the agreements are included in your workshop packets for your review. Next, I will discuss the highlights of them in more detail. Next slide. The Defense Access Road, or DAR, Project Memorandum of Agreement establishes the roles, responsibilities, funding, and procedures for joint participation in the DAR project by the Army, Eastern Federal Lands, VDOT, and Arlington County. In this agreement are core provisions for each of the parties. The Army is responsible for funding the project. They are the lead for environmental study and documentation, performing design reviews, construction inspection, and acceptance for Army facilities, and conveying property to VDOT and the county. Eastern Federal Lands is administering the design and construction of the project. VDOT will perform design reviews, construction inspections, and acceptance for VDOT-maintained roadways, and convey property to the Army as defined in the relocation agreement. Arlington County is providing $500,000 for design of a multi-use trail, performing design reviews, construction inspection, and acceptance of county-maintained roadways. Next slide. The contract for relocation or alteration of existing facilities between VDOT and the U.S. government, represented by the Corps of Engineers, defines the VDOT right-of-way within the limits of the Route 27 and Route 244 interchange that will be conveyed to the U.S. government and the compensation VDOT will receive. In exchange for VDOT right-of-way, the U.S. government will construct an equivalent substitute facility at the interchange, including replacement land and utilities. The compensation for VDOT is based on substitute facility doctrine, which is established by a U.S. Supreme Court decision in other cases that allow a public entity such as the United States to provide an equivalent substitute facility in lieu of cash when acquiring lands from another public entity, such as VDOT. Next slide. The graphic here depicts the property transfers that will take place under the DAR project. The area to the right in blue shows the right-of-way for the interchange that will be conveyed to the Army. Currently, the existing right-of-way is 11.36 acres. Of this, 8.41 acres are being transferred to the Army. The Army will be transferring 1.03 acres to VDOT, as shown in green, as right-of-way for Columbia Pike and the interchange ramps. VDOT's new net right-of-way on the west side of the interchange will consist of 3.98 acres. VDOT will also be transferring 0.75 acres of easement from the right of way from Route 27 to the Army, shown in blue at center left on the graphic, needed for the new cemetery operations and maintenance complex. Next slide. In conclusion, this graphic shows the final conditions for land ownership and roadways associated with the southern expansion project for Arlington National Cemetery. Columbia Pike is realigned, the interchange is reconfigured, and new federal lands are available for the expansion of Arlington National Cemetery. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roper. Any questions or comments from the board?
Secretary, it's Mary. Just want to remind my colleagues, this has been in process for a very long time. I was on the county board in Arlington in 2012, and it was being talked about then. This is a good solution that will solve a lot of problems for many of the parties, and I am very grateful that VDOT has agreed to participate in this. That part of this process has been seamless, and the commitment's been consistent for many years. So I look forward to this actually coming to fruition. It's pretty exciting.
Anyone else? Okay, well, Mr. Roper, you just did an excellent job. Thank you so much. With that, Mr. Tucker, I think you heard in the public meeting that there's great interest in getting an update on SMARTSCALE.
Good morning, Madam Secretary, members of the board. Can y'all hear me okay? All right, excellent. So I'm going to take a little bit of your time this morning to give you an update on the SMARTSCALE round 4 process. My apologies for not participating via video. After 8 months of teleworking and social distancing, I'm starting to resemble Tom Hanks from the hit movie Castaway. Next slide. One more. All right, one of the first things I wanted to go over was just to remind you of some of the policy changes for round 4. As with each round, we make minor adjustments from round to round. We did shorten the pre-app intake window to give us more time to work through issues and screen the projects before they move to the full app. We implemented pre-app cap limits, 4+1 for anyone that was capped at 4, and then 10 plus an extra 2 for anyone that was capped at 10 in case any projects got screened out. For eligibility, we did make some adjustments, minor adjustments to eligibility. Transit maintenance facilities had to include an accompanying capacity or service expansion, and we also prohibited system-wide projects. And then we also upped the bar for project readiness, which we've done incrementally each round. Next slide. The pre-screening process went very well. Pre-applications were submitted in April. That gave us time to provide feedback to the applicants on whether or not the project met one of the 3 conditions that we screen on. Does the project meet a VTrans need? Is it eligible for SMARTSCALE? And does it meet readiness requirements? This allowed us to provide feedback to the applicants sooner in the process so that they could adjust. And I think that's paying off. We're not completely through the screening process yet, but the numbers are going to be significantly reduced over previous rounds as far as the number of applications that will screen out. So I think that process worked well. It gave us and the applicants time to address any issues, and we were able to give them that feedback early in the process. Next slide. There were some minor scoring methodology changes, and I'll go over those very quickly. For the safety factor, we are implementing targeted crash modification factors. So for example, if a project is doing roadway lighting, that will allow us to target crashes that occur at night. There was a modification to the weighting in the safety factor area, with more weighting going to the crash frequency. This is to support the CTB's goal to reduce the total number of fatal and injury crashes. in the Commonwealth. For the congestion factor, we've implemented a method to better account for the peak period of congestion that occurs throughout the entire week. So we include congestion that occurs on weekends. For the environmental factor, we've figured out a way to make that a subtractive measure, as opposed to in the past we were adding points, and it did lead to some questionable results, or head scratchers, if you will, as far as bigger projects actually and more impactful projects scoring more points. For economic development, we did cap the floor area ratio. We allowed for zoned only properties at 0.3, which will result in more reasonable results for more speculative developments that are zoned. And then we also incorporated the Virginia Economic Development Partnership's business-ready sites into the weighting process. There was also the last change there in the land use factor was to put on even weighting of 50-50, the weighting that we apply that is calculated based on the future density, as well as the L2 measure, which is the change in density. So this provides some balance between areas that are already developed as well as areas that are emerging and are seeing more development today. Next slide. Submissions by project type this round. We have a total of 405 applications that were submitted. That is a reduction over what was submitted in previous rounds. In previous round, we had, I think it was 436 applications submitted. So we did see a downtick in the number of total applications that were submitted. And I think, you know, perhaps the pandemic has had some influence on that. About 3/4 of the projects are highway projects, with 20% of the projects being bike ped. About 45% of the bike ped submissions are in the Hampton Roads and Richmond districts. But I would point out it's not just in urban areas. So, for example, out in the Eastern Shore, in Mr. Johnson's neck of the woods, 4 bike ped applications were submitted on the Eastern Shore. And that just goes to show how important that node is in both urban and rural areas. And a number of applications were submitted in the Richmond district from Ashland, Chesterfield, Henrico, and the city of Richmond to support the Fall Line Trail. Next slide. I thought the board would be interested in sort of a breakdown by project type in each of the rounds. And I did misspeak earlier. We got 405 this round. We had 468 applications were submitted in round 3. So we've got about a 13% reduction in the total number of project requests. Next slide. The total cost of the project submissions, this is a little bit interesting in that there was a pretty significant drop in the total project cost of all submissions submitted throughout the Commonwealth. And you can see a breakdown there by each district. A pretty significant drop in most districts. I would point out Hampton Roads. You know, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project was funded last round. And I think, you know, part of the reason for this trend, I think there's a couple of things that are influencing this. One is many of the larger scale improvements in the Commonwealth have been successful over the last 6 to 8 years, whether it's through SMARTSCALE, but also through regional funding sources, PPPA investments, local investments. So improvements to I-81, I-66, I-95, VRE, 495, I-64 with the HRBT and high-rise, and a significant amount of leverage funding coming from local, regional, and private sources. A lot of the bigger projects have been funded and been successful, and I think that's one of the things contributing to the decrease in the total submissions this round. It could also, the pandemic could be playing a role in this. As we were taking pre-applications, that was right as we were going into lockdown. And there was a lot of uncertainty with respect to local and state revenue sources. So I would suspect that that could have played a role in the number of applications that were submitted this round as well. Next slide. The total funding requested also went down, although not as significantly as the total cost of the projects. So the total requested funding last round was over $8.2 billion, and in this round it's over $5.5 billion. So a marked decrease in the total amount of requested funding, and you can see the comparisons there for each district. Next slide. I think the biggest drop as far as the total funding can be attributed to the amount of leverage funding brought to the table this round. Each of the previous rounds have been pretty heavily leveraged. Last round in particular at $5.3 billion of leverage funding. You can see there in Hampton Roads, very significant amount of leverage funding coming from HR TAC for the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project. So we saw a marked dip in the total amount of leverage funding statewide go from 5.3 billion down to 1.7 billion. So again, a lot of the bigger projects had been funded, and also our regional partners are now allocating more as they get the money, whereas in previous rounds they had multiple years of allocations that they could leverage. Next slide. The last statistical slide breaking down the cost by round is the average total cost per project. And so you can see round 4 compared with previous rounds. So statewide, a decrease in the average requested funding amount in most of the districts as well. And this can be attributed to, I think, a lot of the bigger mega projects have been funded, but also there's been an effort on behalf of the state pushing performance-based planning and looking for ways to more cost-effectively solve transportation problems throughout the Commonwealth. And this has really taken hold in many of the districts as far as looking for more cost-effective ways to bring improved performance and improved safety to the transportation network. So whereas last round the average request amount was at 29 million, now we're at 18 million. And then you can see the breakdown by district. My final slide is just a reminder. We have Mr. Donahue has spoke to the board about performance-based planning. A couple of months ago, I gave a presentation. The VDOT STARS program has been around for over a decade, and it's really a targeted performance-based planning program to support localities and regions in coming up with cost-effective solutions. The Transportation Mobility Planning Division has been overseeing this program since its inception, and they do maintain statistics on the success of STARS recommendations in the SMARTSCALE program. In the last 3 rounds of SMARTSCALE, the STARS recommendations that have been submitted have had a success rate of over 80%, which is pretty phenomenal. So in the coming months, I just wanted to remind the board that we will be coming to you and discussing more about setting up the project pipeline and making that approach, that performance-based approach to planning, more of how we do day-to-day business with respect to project planning. And with that, I'll accept any questions that y'all may have about my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Any questions or comments from the board?
Madam Secretary.
Go
ahead, Ms. Hines.
Well, thanks, Shep. So I really want to thank Chad for pulling all these statistics together. They're really interesting. I was struck at the bottom of the statistics slides. Each time it said cost estimation is still going on or validation. I forget exactly what it said on the slide. I spent Thursday talking with all of my jurisdictions in anticipation of VTrans, but SMARTSCALE came up too. And one of the issues we're seeing in Northern Virginia is that even though in the pre-screening process they worked with the NOVA VDOT, when the costs go down to the state to be validated, we're seeing in a lot of cases between a 40 and a 50% increase in cost. And in several cases, my people said, you know, if we had known this was what VDOT thought the cost was, we might have submitted a different project. And so I flag this because I think we've got, you know, we've been trying to get our arms around this estimation issue. If, you know, after they've submitted is when the final estimation comes in, we're removing a tool from the localities in terms of making choices about what they might want to submit that could be successful. And we're spending a lot of time, both at the state and at the local level, moving a project forward that probably has not a lot of chance of being funded. So I'm deeply concerned about this estimation piece, and you know, interested in any thoughts and reflections folks have on it. But I think we're going to have to dig deeper to understand this moving forward. It was a big issue in NOVA last time. We saw lots of increases. I thought we'd fixed it, but here it is again. So I just wanted to flag that.
No, Ms. Hines, the cost estimation process is an area that we have gotten quite a bit of feedback over the last month or two. I think part of the issue this round is in previous rounds we've asked the applicant to provide us the inflated estimate based on their schedule, and in this round we asked them to provide the base year estimate, and then based on work that Susan Keene and Butch and others and the chief did over the last year, we built in a inflation tool into the portal that would take based on their schedule and their base year estimate and would inflate it out. So that I think has caused you know, some degree of shock, if you will, where the applicant put in the base year estimate and then they're seeing the inflated estimate afterwards. But the other thing is, I think, and this is something that we've talked about in previous board meetings, is the degree to which risk and contingency can get built into cost estimates. And I think holding individual projects to an expectation that the project will never go over can cause people to build extra risk and contingency into their estimates, as opposed to taking, say, a more programmatic approach and looking at how are we doing from a program standpoint as far as are the projects that are coming in under covering the few projects that come in over. One statistic that I believe we've shared with the board before is in the previous rounds of funded SMARTSCALE projects, the projects that have gone to add have been, I want to say it's somewhere around within 3% of what they were awarded or what they were estimated at, which if you mention that statistic to other states, it just blows them away because they're lucky to be within 30 or 40% of their planning level estimate. So there's a lot of success within the program as far as us keeping very close to cost estimates, but the few that have gone over, I think it has caused, you know, some folks to be wary of developing an estimate that may be more realistic, but may have some risk associated with it. So it's really a balancing act. And I think that's probably some of the feedback that you're hearing from the applicants, is both this inflation as well as some of the risk and contingency that can get built into some of these cost estimates.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Ms. Hines, I'd be more than happy to listen and call you after this to better understand the conversations that you've been having with the localities and their direct feedback. I would say that as we go forward, the cost estimation process, as we shared with you last month, is something that is going to evolve and going to evolve very rapidly within the organization to be able to enhance how we do our business. As we shared with you, the trend line since we've started advertising the SMARTSCALE projects, our estimating process is off. And I think we have shown that, as Chad just indicated, how we have priced risk and contingency into the first at least two rounds of SMARTSCALE. I think we'll see a better recognition of the risk and contingency being incorporated into the cost estimates for round 3 as well as round 4. I share with you that I thought we had a lot of this addressed already within as we entered the round 3 submission. So I'm very interested in hearing what that feedback is. But this is going to be certainly how we evolve the cost estimation process as Chad put it, at the very beginning of this in the planning process, and then migrating it all the way through to construction advertisement. And when we have very little engineering performed on that project. But having said that, I think the takeaway is I'm very interested in understanding the direct concerns that you're hearing right now, but also recognize that the agency is continuing to evolve in itself on the cost estimating process, as we shared with you last month.
I appreciate that, Commissioner, and I'm happy to share the comments in more detail. I was flipping through my notes. It was a whole day, so I kind of got to get myself more organized. But nonetheless, I do think it's really interesting to me that we have a tool that can take that base cost and escalate it. We might want to make that tool available to the localities to use in the pre-scoping so that they can think a little bit about whether they want to submit projects or not based on how that may change the cost. So it may just be a timing of when things are available.
Yeah, and we'll follow up with you separately.
Thank you.
Chair.
I will, Commissioner, I was going to find you because I knew this was going to be a huge priority for you to keep track of these comments as we try to move through that estimation process far more effectively. So anyway, and I know that work is ongoing with our chief engineer Thrasher and Mr. Malbin and Mr. Kaskowitz as well. So Mr. Miller, do you have a comment?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I just want to continue to understand and better understand sort of how we factor in the decisions we make about bike lanes and whether we add them or don't add them, or even the trails. I'm a pretty big proponent of the Elizabeth River Trail, which is down in Hampton Roads. The Capitol Trail is a fantastic trail. But having said that, when we look at the advisability of adding bike lanes, I'm wondering, because I'm concerned about it, how we measure the value that those lanes bring to us. Certainly in Norfolk, and I've been beating the drum down here a bit about this, we've converted a bunch of lanes to bike lanes over the last numbers of years. And unfortunately, they're very underutilized. And yet we continue to do that. And I'm a big proponent of them if we're going to find a way to get people to use them. I'm not a proponent of them if we're not going to find a way, if people decide not to use them, then we've just spent gazillions of dollars on paving a lane that nobody's going to use and taking it away from what is being used by vehicular traffic. So I'm sort of wondering I'm trying to understand how that gets factored in the scoring to add those into projects or to have their own project. because I continue to see down here ones that we build and they're just not used. And I'm talking winter, summer, night, day, weekend, whatever. It's just very little traffic in them. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, that's a fair question. I will say, you know, bike ped infrastructure, from a delay standpoint, they don't get any points in delay. Where they get points in congestion is going to be in their ability to increase throughput along a particular corridor. I think in areas types A and B, it's the land use measure is where they tend to get some points. Also, the low cost of them. I was reading a recent article. There's a mobility data vendor called Streetlight that Virginia uses rather extensively, released a report. And over the last year, there's been an 11% increase in biking in the major metropolitan areas throughout the nation. And bike ped infrastructure is, if you've got an underinvestment that's been occurring over the last many decades, sometimes it can take establishing that base network of bike lanes, shared use paths, sidewalks before the community, has enough connections to where you start to see that increase in actual utilization and usage. So that could be part of what you see. I won't say that every single bike ped project is successful, but sometimes it requires getting that base network established to where you start to see the usage go up. And so that may be part of what you're seeing down in the Hampton Roads region. I do know the city of Richmond has made extensive investments, and you can really see it when you ride in the city of Richmond as far as the number of folks biking and walking, as well as in the Northern Virginia region. So I think sometimes it just takes some investment and some time before the utilization catches up.
I totally get that. It's the build it, they will come scenario, and I understand how that works. I guess my question is, how do we monitor that, and how long do we wait?
So, Madam Chair, this is Nick. If I could jump in to also add some other context to Mr. Tucker's kind of comments. So I think in addition to kind of some of the things that Mr. Tucker raised, one of the other, I think, kind of major benefits at times of some of these projects, and Mr. Miller, I want to be clear, I can't speak to every project, and so there may be examples down in your part of the state that don't fall in line with what I'm getting ready to outline. But in a lot of cases where we've seen local governments ask for these types of projects, there's a 4-lane road that is carrying essentially traffic that could easily be carried in a 2-lane road, and that is causing speeds and other sorts of safety issues. And so in many instances, some of these concepts of going in and adding kind of turn lanes and then putting in the bike lanes is also about safety and seeking to reduce the number of incidents that are happening on a given roadway. And so an example, and again, I should note this is not from your part of the state, but from Northern Virginia, was Lawyers Road in Fairfax County, where there was a 4-lane road there that had a significant number of speeding and other sorts of incidents. That road was reconstructed to essentially become 1 through lane in each direction along with turn lanes, and it also added bike lanes in that area. And they saw reduced instances of speeding in that facility along with a reduced number of crashes. And so there are some other incidents kind of to that end. I do think to your second follow-up question you provided to Mr. Tucker, we are at the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment starting to track completed SMART-SCALE projects to compare the results that we're seeing from them compared to what was estimated when the project was scored. That is going to take some time. Some of the first round 1 SMART-SCALE projects are now being completed, but we are not actually complete with. They're not all completed yet, and then we'll need a few years after they are completed to start to collect that data. But it is our intent to provide this before and after comparison of what we thought was going to take place and compare that with how it took place. And again, the goal there is to see general alignment with our expectations were X, and we got something close to X as an output. And again, I think if we don't, then we will, try and study the outcomes, regardless of what type of project this is. This could be a roadway widening, new road, bike lanes, transit project, etc., to try and understand what might have happened there and why perhaps the analysis of the project before it was constructed did not align with the outcomes from the project once it was put in place and built using tax dollars.
Got it. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Donahue. Anybody else?
Madam Chair.
Oh, Mr. Smoot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chad, you indicated that in the ranking that we were giving more weighting to crash frequency, and I remember that conversation several meetings ago. But remind me, what does that mean we're giving less weighting to?
So that in the safety factor area, one measure looks at the reduction in frequency or the total, the reduction in the total number of accidents. The second measure in safety is the reduction in the crash rate. So before, the weighting was at 50-50, and based on the board action 8 or 10 months ago, the weight was changed to a 70-30 split.
And what is crash rate?
Crash rate is the number of fatal and injury crashes that are occurring per 100 million vehicle miles traveled.
Okay, so it's in some respects it's a density consideration.
Yeah, sort of like an exposure. Exactly. So you could have say a lower volume road that had a lower number of crashes, and when you do the math, the crash rate is higher than a facility with higher number of crashes, but also a higher number of vehicles or a higher VMT.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Donahue and Mr. Tucker, we often refer back to streetlight. I think it would be really great, given the unprecedented times in which we are living and looking at what the future may hold, what trends are actually presenting to us, to have them back for a presentation in 2021 early on. So anyway, I think it would be very interesting for the board as well.
Okay.
With that, I'm going to invite Dave Covington to give us an update on the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program.
Good morning, Madam Secretary and members of the board. We are providing this presentation today because the board will have to take action in December to advance the annual report to the General Assembly. So if we move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Can we advance to the next slide, please? Can we advance to the next slide, please?
Dave, let me see what's going on. We might be having some technical difficulties on our end.
Are we on track now? Justin, is that you?
We were able
Janice
to
hand.
for a second.
If you can hear me, can we advance? Can we advance to the next slide, please? If you can hear me, can we advance to the next slide, please? Hello, do I have audio now?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and check in and see what the issue is. Oh, I see our moderators there. Justin, is that you advancing the slides?
It is not. I can speak to it briefly. I think we're having a technical issue over here, and our team is working on it. Want to just give us a few moments, and we'll try to determine what the issue is with the slide advancing.
Okay, well, we'll just pause for a moment. Dave, can you hear me?
I can hear. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me? Dave Covington, can you hear me? I'll try to call you.
Okay, thank you. Audio test. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we'll wait to hear from Carol or Justin to let us know about the slide advancement. Are we good to go?
Excellent, thank you. It seems we are. Hopefully you heard my introduction, but I'll just quickly repeat that the board will need to take action in December to advance the I-81 annual report to the General Assembly, which is why we're providing this update this morning. A quick agenda run through. We will quickly review the 2019 Acts of Assembly. We will review COVID-19 traffic impacts to the I-81 corridor, performance measure comparison, project development process, or a status update of where the program is, assessment of strategies, annual program allocations and financing plan, and a takeaway scorecard. Next slide, please. So the 2019 Acts of Assembly review per chapters 837 and 846, requiring the CTB to advance an annual report to the General Assembly. The report must be submitted by December 15th. This report is currently being completed. It is expected that the report will be completed the first week of December and advanced to the board for review. But the four areas are performance of the I-81 corridor, effectiveness of operational strategies and capital improvements, status of the projects, current and projected I-81 fund balance, and then annual program allocation, financing plan, and schedule of projects and strategies. Next slide, please. We'll begin with a look at what were the impacts of COVID-19 to the I-81 corridor. The information that we see here today is indicative of impacts to most of the interstate systems across the state. But first, we'll look at all vehicle types. And just quickly, this is broken down per district, the 3 districts along the corridor: Bristol, Salem, and Stanton. And beginning around the middle of March, we see a precipitous drop in volumes. The low peak at roughly approximately 60% below equivalent times from the previous year. Around the middle of April, we see a relatively steady recovery all the way up to this data is good through the end of September. And we have not yet reached the equivalent volumes that we had in 2019. We're, depending on the day, we could be, 5, maybe even 10% below where we were in 2019. So if we advance to the next slide, we can look at a little bit of an isolation here of passenger vehicles, and we see a very similar shape. We see that drop beginning in mid-March. We see, the peak around mid-April, sometimes even below the 60% threshold of 2019 volumes. That steady recovery, but still not recovering to the volumes of 2019. In this case, we see that we're more solidly in the 10 to 15% below equivalent volumes from 2019. So if we advance to the next slide, we will take a closer look at the impacts to truck traffic. And we see a much different shape in this diagram. We do see around the same timeline, the mid-March drop, the low peak in the roughly middle of April. I will also point out that the scale on this, on the left side, has changed. It was showing down to 60% previously. This is showing down to 40%. We see a much more quick recovery in the volumes of truck traffic. And if you notice toward the tail end of this diagram, you will see that we have exceeded the volumes from 2019 along the I-81 corridor in a somewhat sustainable manner for a period of roughly a month to 2 months. Next slide, please. So what were our performance measures? This takes us back to the creation of the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program. What measures were used to establish the baseline? I just wanted to quickly review those. Again, we are looking at safety and performance measures, and those include crash frequency and severity, person hours of delay, the number of incidents involving lane closures, and the average duration of incidents involving those lane closures. So this was the basis of the development of the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program. Next slide, please. Okay, here what we see in the performance measures, this is kind of establishing the baseline comparison. We do, I want to start this off by saying that while some of our Corridor Improvement Program projects have been completed, based on the date of those projects being completed, the first operational improvements being completed late in 2019, as well as 8 ramp extension projects. And this data only goes through from 2018 to 2019. So, while some of those projects have been completed, I don't think that we can make any real observations yet as it relates to the performance of those improvement projects. This data is collected in 2-year and 5-year increments, depending on the type. We see at the top the 2-year increments, and at the bottom the equivalent property damage only crashes are aggregated in 5-year implements there. But we do continue to see fluctuations based on each performance type. One thing I will point out is that as we move forward, the data from 2020 as a result of COVID is going to create significant challenges in measuring the effectiveness of the improvements. So we do have a hurdle to get over here to rectify how we're going to handle the unusual data from 2020 and how we measure effectiveness of the program projects. Next slide, please. So our operational improvement project status, we have 3 project types that have been completed. We had the curb improvements, the static and flashing chevron installations. These were among the first projects that we completed to enhance safety immediately, deliver these quick projects that often have low investment but high return on that investment. Safety service patrol enhancements along the entire corridor. So we added more vehicles, more personnel, more routes, and more hours. We did also install devices called lift and tow on some of our safety service patrol vehicles, which can quickly remove passenger vehicles that become disabled in the travel lane and either get them to the shoulder or potentially the next interchange. So all three of those have been completed. We are aggressively implementing the Towing and Recovery Incentive Program, or TRIP program. The application deadline is the 30th of this month, or the end of November, with implementation scheduled for March of 2021. We have installed 51 additional traffic cameras along the corridor, which really helps us with response and recognition of incidents. 42 of those cameras are currently available on Virginia's 511 app. 8 are currently awaiting integration to that application. However, they are available to the Traffic Operations Center, so they are valuable to us. And 1 is awaiting electrical service installation. There was a electrical service provider that has been challenged by COVID that has not been able to reach that device yet. In addition, the changeable message signs, they are currently under construction and slightly ahead of schedule with a fixed completion date of October 28 of 2021. Next slide, please. We also have some arterial improvement projects, and these are classified under the operational improvement umbrella. And we basically have 2 types of projects. We have traffic signal upgrades and some parallel route upgrades. With regard to the traffic signal upgrades, we are currently in the planning and design stage. We are also communicating heavily with the localities along some of our arterial or parallel routes for these traffic signal system upgrades and ultimately integration into the VDOT central signal system along the corridor. We need to ensure that the localities are comfortable with these improvements and understand how to operate the signals within their boundaries. The integration into the VDOT central signal system, when we have an incident along I-81, we were able to detour traffic to these alternate routes and modify the signal timing to keep traffic moving during those incidents and prevent secondary incidents along the parallel routes. With regard to the parallel route upgrades, we have a few minor geometric improvements that we are making, and it really is to facilitate access to and from I-81 during incidents. These are under design now with construction coming in the near future. What we really are driving to do here is to make intersection improvements so that large trucks can maneuver these intersections and not create secondary incidents that have to be managed during a major incident on I-81. Next slide, please. So with regard to the capital projects, I want to provide an update on where we stand, and I hope that you will see that we, through the COVID period here, have been moving with urgency and purpose to deliver these projects. We have 56 projects that are capital improvement projects that are within the program right now. 16 of those projects are in the planning stage. These are what we refer to as the out-year projects. These projects are not scheduled to begin any sort of design until approximately 2023 or later. We have 8 projects that have been completed. These were completed ahead of schedule and on budget. These are all ramp extension projects. We had 5 projects in the Stanton district that have been completed, 1 in the Salem district and 2 in Bristol district. And that leaves 32 projects. And those 32 projects are currently in some form or some phase of the design process right now for delivery. Next slide, please. And over these next few slides, what I'd like to do is give you a sense of where these projects are and how they're being delivered. So we'll begin with the Bristol district. We have 7 projects that are currently under design by VDOT staff. We have 6 projects that are currently under design by an on-call consultant. So this is our location and design on-call consultant contracts. We have 2 projects that are under design by project-specific consultants. That means that we went through a procurement process to select that design team. And these are generally our larger projects where we go through that procurement process. And we have one design build project that is currently under design for advertisement in December of this year or January of next year. Based on the holidays and the status of the project, it will likely be advertised in January. And we have two projects, as I mentioned previously, with construction complete. So the bottom line is we have 18 projects that are within the 6-year improvement program as part of the I-81 corridor improvement program in the Bristol district. And of those 18, all are currently under design or have completed construction. Next slide, please. Now we move to the Salem district. We have 2 projects under design by VDOT staff. We do not have any projects currently under design by an on-call consultant. We have 1 project that is under design by a project-specific consultant, again, meaning it was procured. We have 2 design build projects that have been bundled together and advertised. We are in active procurement for that. The request for proposals was advertised in October of 2020. And this is one of our larger projects on the program. We're very excited to move this project forward quickly. And again, we have 1 project that the construction has been completed. So of the 6 projects that are current in the Salem district, all are currently under design or construction, or have completed construction, excuse me. Next slide, please. Now we move to the Stanton district. Similar information. We have 6 projects that are under design by VDOT staff, 1 project under design by an on-call consultant, 2 projects that are under design by project-specific consultants. We have not yet identified a candidate design build project in the Stanton district. And we have 2 projects that are bundled together that are currently under contract negotiations. We are very close to completing these contract negotiations for design services. And that's the Weir's Cave truck climbing lanes, northbound and southbound. And then again, we have 5 projects where construction is complete. So of the 16 current projects in the Stanton district, 14 are currently under design or have completed construction. The other 2 are the Weir's Cave projects, which we are completing negotiations for design services now. Next slide, please. So a quick review of the fiscal year 2020 performance. And before I go over this, I would like to just thank Laura Farmer and Kim Pryor for helping us drive this program forward under some challenging times. We do have good news on the fiscal front, but they have done a fantastic job of helping us quickly move projects forward. An example is that large design build project in Salem district. So with regard to funding, our estimates from February for regional fuel tax was $55 million. Actual collections was $69.8 million. Truck registration fees estimate was $30.2 million. Actual collections was $19.3 million. And we believe that a contributing factor to the deficiency there was the extending of the credentials for the trucking industry, which was a very necessary thing to do during the COVID period. Road taxes estimate was $6.8 million. Actual collections as of the end of the fiscal year were $3.3 million. So the estimate was $92 million. Actual collections was $93.1 million. As of the end of the fiscal year, we had project expenditures of $7.6 million that will certainly have grown since that period. And cash balance at the end of the fiscal year was $85.5 million. Next slide, please. So our takeaway scorecard. I mentioned previously, we saw similar information about the status of these projects, but the curve improvements, 8 curve improvements, the initial acceleration and deceleration lane extension projects, 8 of those, and the safety service patrol expansion are all complete. The addition of 51 cameras along the corridor is nearly complete, with only awaiting the integration of 8 of those cameras, plus electrical service and integration for 1 additional camera. We hope that will be completed in the very near future. The additional changeable message signs are underway. They are slightly ahead of schedule with anticipated completion in October of next year. And the arterial upgrades and the remaining 32 capital improvement projects, certainly they are underway and they vary by project. We do hope to advance some of the traffic signal upgrades, and especially in the Stanton district in the near future, followed quickly by Stanton and Bristol district, or Salem and Bristol district, sorry. And if we move to our last slide, I just want to take the opportunity to make everyone aware, if you're not already, that we do now have a standalone program-specific website, www.improve81.org, which is really our one-stop shop for information about the program. I'm quite proud of the development of this site. I think it's highly functional. And while we do have this new tool, especially with some enhancements such as an interactive map on the homepage, we have maintained historical data on the Commonwealth Transportation Board's website. So I encourage everyone to visit this site and check out its features and provide any feedback that you may have. With that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Covington. Really well done. Any comments or questions from the board?
Yes, ma'am. This is John Mulvin. Dave, on your revenue slide, I saw a revenue stream called road tax. What is that?
Yeah, these are the Department of Motor Vehicles road taxes. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in, but effectively, it's the tax we're using the roads for the trucking industry.
So, Mr. Donahue?
Madam Secretary, I had to ask Laura to be able to respond to that instead of Mr. Donahue.
Ms. Farmer?
Sure. Good morning, Madam Secretary. The road tax is one of the 3 sources that were dedicated to the interstates through the 2019 General Assembly session. It is an assessment, and it's great. It's tied to the trucking industry, kind of.
Alvin, when we passed the I-81 interstate funding bill, it was an increase. It was based on 3 revenue sources, one being the diesel fuel tax, the road tax, which is calculated by the trucking industry, and a regional fuel tax for the jurisdictions along the 81 corridor.
Well, ma'am, on the road tax, is that based on when trucks register? Is it the weight capacity of trucks, axles, what? How's the trucking industry? What is the matrix for charging that revenue stream?
Ms. Farmer, isn't that the tax that the trucking industry actually calculates and keeps track of?
Yes, ma'am. That's my understanding. Yes, that's my understanding.
So it is something that is reported, but when Mr. Donahue gets back on the call, I will ask him to go ahead and address that specifically.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
We wish we had more information. That is something that is administered by the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Madam Secretary, this is Mark Merrill. I had a question and a comment, or 2 questions rather.
Oh.
Now go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah. First was in reference to your comment just then. Does that information that was just shown include all those sources of revenue, including the fuel tax for the 81 corridor residents? And then secondarily, with regard to the safety improvements, I would commend Mr. Covington. That's a lot of good work. But has the state also considered putting up those speed signs at what your speed is? Because those also seem to be highly effective in our jurisdiction. You know, the flashing lights when you're going over 60 as a safety enhancement.
Madam Secretary, I'll respond at least to the device Mr. Merrill has talked about. We do not put those up on the interstate system. Certainly, we're looking at some other opportunities to be able to better have closer speed compliance than what we have. Obviously, there's a component to the enforcement, and that's part of what we're working with the Department of State Police on. But also, we're looking at other opportunities to be able to expand variable speed limits within the Commonwealth to better regulate speeds in real time. And I intend to bring a presentation back to the Commonwealth Transportation Board as soon as January of this year to talk about a pilot program in addition to the existing variable speed limits that we have along the I-77 corridor. So I think stay tuned and we'll bring more back to you on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes. Can you hear me?
So could you give a more thorough explanation of the road tax? That's part of the
Yes.
81 interstate funding.
Yeah, so the road tax is a mechanism that several states have in place. It's actually collected through what's known as the International Fuels Tax Agreement. And so it is the concept that many of these large trucks that use our roadways have tanks that essentially can fit several hundred gallons of diesel. So 1, 2, and sometimes even more than that in diesel. And so that means a truck could drive through an entire state without ever stopping to purchase fuel. And so many states have, through the International Fuels Tax Agreement, or IFTA is what is colloquially known as, have entered into a concept where truck drivers for these states that participate in IFTA keep a log of the miles they've driven within a given state, and then on a quarterly basis, essentially do a true up with all the states where they bought gas. And so if they only buy gas in one state, but they drive across 4, that one state would remit a refund to them, and then they pay effectively a per mile rate back to the other states for the number of miles that they've driven on a quarterly basis. And this applies to trucks that weigh 26,000 pounds and more. And so it's something to kind of capture usage dollars from those large vehicles.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the
Well, I just one more question on road tax. If I remember, that slide suggested that our regional fuels tax was above estimate and the road tax was like 50% of estimate. It seems like the two of them should be in sync.
Mr. Rabbit, I understand the kind of comment that you're making there. What I would just say is that for whatever reason, I apologize. My 2-year-old's just running to the background, so I'm sorry for that. Is tax has used certain proxies for their estimates of the regional fuels tax in the past that have generally kind of worked out to be in line. I think what we saw on the 81 corridor is that the estimating process they used turned out to be lower in that particular instance, and I think that might reflect the higher volume of through traffic. So I think one of the major proxies, and again, I don't do the estimating, I'm relaying just kind of my general understanding of what is done with the tax department, is that population and then another proxy related to trucks was used to try and break down what is otherwise a statewide fuels tax revenue and then assign it to individual counties and then kind of compile that back up to a region. And I think in 81, because of the high level of through travel, both truck and car, simply that the estimates ended up being low. On the road tax, I think we're still kind of looking at that issue to understand it, but I think it may be a mix of simply the revenue stream not performing as well and potentially some overestimation issues that were related to the original revenue estimate that were higher than they just should have been. But that is something that we're still kind of examining. I think looking to see what happens in coming years. For those who are particularly interested, though, in the interstate program, I think an important thing to note is moving forward, the interstate program and the 81 program are not reliant on these 3 revenue streams because the governor's omnibus bill took all of the state revenue streams, put them into the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, and then we redistribute revenues out on a percentage basis. And so all of our programs that have statewide dollars in them are now going to be supported by kind of a blended revenue stream, which should help minimize any impacts from a particular source going up or down in a given year there.
Madam Secretary.
Mr. Smoot, if you hold on one second, I did want you to know that Dale Bennett, who is Executive Director of the Virginia Trucking Association, sent me a note, and I will just read this to you. The road tax is the surcharge paid by vehicles over 26,000 pounds that is in addition to the tax rate assessed at the pump. As of July 1, 2020, the additional tax is 13.7 cents per gallon. On July 1, 2021, the total tax on trucks over 26,000 pounds will be 40.7 cents per gallon of the fuel used in Virginia. So part of it was, Nick, that all of this was being phased in over a 3-year period. And I also wonder if when the true up actually happened in this particular presentation. So Mr. Malbin, you're raising some really good questions. And so anyway, we'll just try to determine whether it was an estimate figure, a true up figure, or whether, was how this was all phased in could also impact that. So with that, Mr. Smoot, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. And John, thank you for raising the question. I was wondering about that as well, particularly in view that truck traffic is back above last year's level. So Nick or whomever, I hope you will get back to us on this after you have a chance to look into it further, because intuitively it just doesn't add up to me.
Okay, well, Mr. Covington and Commissioner Britch, we will certainly look at, the numbers in the table, try to determine the reasoning behind it. So anyone else? Okay, with that, and Mr. Donahue, welcome back. I will say that. I'm going to bring back Kim Pryor and Laura Farmer to do the 6-year improvement program presentation to the board.
Good morning. Next slide, please. Today I'm going to provide to you an update very similar to the one we presented in October, related to our assumptions for the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, the plan itself, the draft VDOT budget that was provided to you in October. And Kim will follow up and describe the updates that we are proposing to get through this short period of time known as a COVID-19 update to the 6-year improvement program. Next slide, please. The CTF preliminary financial plan is based on several things. The governor's omnibus bill from this past regular session, a piece of legislation that provided regional funds for the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. It also established the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Program through House Bill 1726 or Senate Bill 1038. And it also includes the interim state revenue update that we were provided in August of this year that updated our 3 major sources for transportation for the next 2 years, that being fuel tax estimate, retail sales and use, and motor vehicle sales and use taxes. This update also reflects the creation of a Commonwealth Transportation Fund and a streamlined distribution of revenue available for transportation, whereby all these major sources are recorded to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund and distributed via shares to the Maintenance Fund as well as the Transportation Trust Fund, where there are further distributions to the modal agencies. This update also includes the assumption related to flexibility. The governor signed a budget that was derived during the special session last week on Wednesday, November 18th. And so the update that we've provided throughout this period of time as we've adjusted to potentially reduced revenues, we provided those updates over several months, and this is a presentation of implementing those strategies to get through this time period and adopt a budget for fiscal year 2021. Next slide, please. This slide provides a preliminary view of our estimated revenues into the CTF, as well as other program sources, including federal revenues, our other financing sources, the continuation of our Garvey bond program, the last year of issuances of our CPR bonds in 2021, and the continued programming of bonds for the Route 58 corridor. The only change on this slide from the October presentation, no, I apologize. The other thing I wanted to mention was the WMATA capital revenues on this slide represent the December 2019 estimate. Next slide, please. This slide provides a view of the estimated allocations of those revenues available. There is one correction from the October presentation for Northern Virginia and Central Virginia. In the second year, we had a formula error for the interstate monies that are committed to Northern Virginia, and that has been corrected on this slide. In addition, the estimates here for WMATA capital represent those from December 2019. And last month, Steve Pitter described the approach for WMATA capital moving forward in his presentation. And the updates that we'll provide in December will also demonstrate the programming of any monies that are in construction or rail and transit projects that are reflected in the 6-year program update. Next slide, please. So as we move forward to implement the omnibus legislation with the COVID-19 impact, we use the flexibility granted under the state budget. So our allocations were sized to meet the expectations from our previous financial plan from June of 2019. We continue to meet expectations of the program that you all adopted for the applicable fiscal years from last summer, almost a year and a half ago. And those assumptions were applied to the first 3 years of the program, whereby flexibility was granted in the omnibus legislation as well as the special session language. We also were able to direct some allocations for remaining funds through fiscal year 23 to phase in some commitments that were anticipated in the omnibus legislation. And we also have reduced the commitment to special structures that was prescribed in the legislation in the current biennium, planning on a full commitment to special structures in fiscal year 2023. A summary of those two bullets related to directed allocations and special structures is provided in the table, and those funds are provided in millions to supplement these program areas. Next slide, please. This slide presents a picture of the VDOT budget that is provided to you for consideration. There are no changes since I presented the information last month. I'd just like to highlight some areas of increase. Our highway construction program, the major driver of that increase is related to the construction of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, primarily financed through HR TAC. It also reflects the additional funding for the special account created for the district grant program. Related to regional programs, this reflects the addition of the Central Virginia Transportation Authority and their dedicated revenue streams that begin this fiscal year. And our capital outlay program for the agency, this was a planned restoration of capital outlay funding for the facilities budgets here at the department. And our support for DRPT programs and the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority reflects the commitment of priority transportation funds and other support that's provided to DRPT for funds that are generally administered by VDOT. Next slide, please. So the details around how we're approaching the revenue sharing program are visually shown on this slide. There's $445 million made available from previously allocated revenue sharing projects whose schedules have not been altered and these funds can be provided in the upcoming fiscal years without changing delivery of those projects, as well as the balance entry of revenue sharing funding totaling $495 million. Those funds are restored over the next 4 fiscal years to those projects as scheduled in the second table. And the allocation for pending applications is demonstrated in fiscal year 25 and 26, with the intention that all future rounds of revenue sharing would be allocated in the 5th and 6th year of each program, aligning those awards with SMARTSCALE rounds. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, we provided a draft fiscal year 21 budgets for both the Commonwealth Transportation Fund and VDOT in October, and we'll be submitting those to you to consider adopting in December. Additionally, our official revenue estimate update will be provided in December, and we'll begin implementation of that for planning the updates for fiscal year 22 and through 27, which we hope will be a normal cycle, and the determination of funding amounts available for SMARTSCALE round 4. If you don't have any questions on my section of the presentation, I'll turn it over to Kim Pryor to talk about the 6-year program.
Madam Secretary, this is Shep.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Laura, you mentioned on slide 4 that the special structures line item had been reduced, and you referenced the omnibus legislation, the biennium. Can you give me a little bit more on that? Is that purely the timing stuff we've been talking about, or is that the way it's written? It sort of indicates maybe it's been reduced. I just want to understand that a little better.
Yes, sir. The omnibus legislation established a special structures program starting at $80 million and growing by CPI annually. There was an enactment clause in the omnibus legislation that allowed us to phase in that commitment. And that enactment clause was, I believe, $10 million in fiscal year 2021 and $30 million in fiscal year 22. And the budget bill language in the budget the governor signed allowed some flexibility in implementation in those 2 fiscal years of implementation for special structures. And so with that in mind, that's rather than providing 10 million in the current year and 30 million in fiscal year 22, we're phasing in with 5 million next year and the full implementation of the program at 80 million in fiscal year 23.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, after Pryor gives her presentation, we can certainly open it up for questions again.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Pryor.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide. I'm going to basically give you the same information, just slightly updated, that I provided last month. And some of this was also shared as part of the virtual public hearing. So I apologize for repeating the information, but want to make sure to drive it all home. The General Assembly session ended November 9th, and the governor signed the budget on November 18th. The approved budget includes flexibilities related to virtual public meetings, the 6-year improvement program, and means of mitigating the impacts of the revenue reductions resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. We continue to make all efforts to be as efficient as possible, and as always, our goal is to keep projects moving on time and on budget. Next slide, please. This just shows some of the detail related to the flexibility language in the approved budget. First, the 6-year program that was adopted by the board back in June of 19 may remain in effect through June 30th, 2021, or until such time as the board adopts a new 6-year program based on a revenue forecast reflecting the impacts of the COVID pandemic. Assistance provided in fiscal year 2021 may be maintained up to the level previously allocated in the FY20 6-year program until such time as we adopt a new 6-year program. And third, the CTB may use previously allocated funds not currently needed to support project delivery to mitigate the impacts of the revenue reductions and replace those allocations in the year needed to support the current project schedule. Next slide, please. Additional budget language also directs the CTB to take all actions necessary to improve appropriate coverage ratios for debt backed by the TTF, as well as distribute funds to the modal programs and the HMOF in such a manner that core program services and existing projects are protected. And then finally, the Secretary is required to report to the Governor and the chairs of the House Appropriation and Senate Finance and Appropriations Committees on the funding actions planned to be taken under this authority using the flexibility language, including a listing of the programs and projects impacted as well as any change to that plan. Next slide, please. As I detailed to you last month, we have taken a targeted approach to updating the FY20 six-year program. Really a three-part strategy to this. We continue to build upon actions approved by the board to date to modify the existing FY20 program. We'll execute a targeted approach to update a couple of final remaining programs. And then again, this is not a normal six-year program. Some things will wait until the FY22 update. Next slide. So as I said, the first part of our strategy is to continue to build upon actions approved by the board through November of this year to amend various projects to the program. We have continued to advance approved projects on schedule and on budget according to their existing schedule. Next slide. The second part of our strategy for the update includes finally updating a couple of more remaining programs. That is the FY21 newly selected local and VDOT state of good repair bridges using the first 5 years of allocations. And then finally adding newly selected revenue sharing projects using allocations available in FY25 and 26. And again, CTB action is planned for that in December. With regard to existing revenue sharing projects, we are using previously allocated funds not currently needed to support project delivery to absorb the revenue reductions from the pandemic while replacing those allocations in FY21 through 24 to support the project's current schedule. No funding commitments will be reduced and no existing projects will be delayed due to the proposed restructuring strategy of the allocations. And then we will continue a biennial solicitation cycle for revenue sharing with awards in the last 2 years of the six-year program, much like SMARTSCALE. Next slide, please. And then finally, there are some processes and procedures of a typical update that we will not undertake as part of this six-year program update. We are retaining the existing structure of the FY20 to 25 six-year program and reflecting the new adjustments for the new transportation funding formula in the FY22 update. We will defer adjustments to the I-81 program to reflect the revised tax structure and debt financing until the FY22 update as well. And as I mentioned this morning during the virtual public meeting, we are deferring the traditional spring and fall public meetings until the FY22 update. Next slide, please. You've seen this a few times now. These are the projects, the number and the amount of revenue sharing projects planned to be adjusted during the update to release previously provided allocations and provide them back in a future fiscal year by FY24 to support the project schedule. There will be some adjustments to these based on project activity that's occurred since March. No project schedules will be delayed and no funding commitments will be reduced on these projects. So, next slide, please. So our next step, we are required, the Secretary is required to report to the Governor and General Assembly committees within 5 days of reporting to the board the funding actions to be taken using the flexibility language in the approved budget. And then Following your approval in December, we have another 5 days to report any changes from those proposed funding actions. Again, approval of the 6-year program is anticipated in December. That will also include approval of new SGR local and VDOT bridges, as well as the newly recommended revenue sharing allocations using FY25 and 26 allocations. And finally, the adoption of the 6-year program itself. And then right on the heels of that, in early 2021, we will begin the update of the full FY22 to 27 6-year improvement program. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I just really want to thank Laura Farmer and Kim Pryor for all the work they have done on this. You know, understanding, you know, the special session, the signing of this particular budget, and moving to a vote on this in December has been really important. And I hope just clarifies why we are having a board meeting the week of Thanksgiving. So I just really want to thank everyone. Any questions or comments from the board?
Madam Secretary, it's Mary.
Ms. Hines?
I'm hoping one of you can, or maybe Jennifer Mitchell can let us know kind of the status of operating funds for transit moving forward. We've been releasing it, if my memory is right, quarter by quarter. Given all of this, is it possible that we could release that continued support through the end of the fiscal year sometime soon? I think juggling the funding is getting a little complicated for some of the agencies.
Yeah, in the and you may recall in the presentation we gave last month, which also teed up our draft 6-year plan as well, which will be coming to you in December. We have gone ahead and allocated the full year of operating assistance. So once that's approved, we'll be able to get that out the door. We actually did have a slight increase actually in the statewide operating funds. So many of the systems will receive some increase, but that's also dependent on their performance factors, which are factored into that as well. So, but that allocation should be up on our website too.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. I did ask for a meeting later today with the Deputy Secretaries Donahue and Lawson and Amy White, just to go over that transmittal to the Governor and General Assembly. Okay, with that, Director Mitchell, do you have any items you'd like to present this morning?
Just a few small items real quick. I did want to just let the board know that we did have the first meeting of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority on October 26th. It was largely a organizational meeting for the board. We adopted bylaws, elected new officers, and authorized the Passenger Rail Authority to enter into an MOU with DRPT regarding the continuation of staff services for that. So we'll have another meeting coming up in December, I believe December 14th. We did also receive good news last month that we received a grant from the Federal Railroad Administration for $14.4 million, which is going to be going to our Newington Road project. It's a Newington Road Bridge project. This is actually a bridge that we're working with VDOT and Fairfax County on that will, it's also part of our Atlantic Gateway program and our Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative. So we were very happy to get that. And then just finally, I wanted to note as well is that we are going to be in future months bringing you more information about a new proposed freight program at DRPT and potential guidelines for implementing that. With the change in the transportation omnibus legislation on creating a new Commonwealth Rail Fund that is now divided between the Passenger Rail Authority and DRPT. We no longer have the Rail Enhancement Fund and IPROC, and so we are creating a new freight rail grant program that we'll be bringing forward to you in the future. So just wanted to let you know, because December is the time of year in which we usually start opening up grant applications. So, and that's all I've got for today. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Mitchell. Commissioner Britch?
Madam Secretary, members of the board, I defer my comments for today in the interest of time to be able to get us into the action agenda. I'll reserve my comments for the December meeting.
Commissioner Britt, and I am going to use my time to turn this over to Ms. DeTunk. We do have a closed session presentation that needs to be made.
Thank you. I move that the board convene in a closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3711A6 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing a project involving the investment of public funds where bargaining is involved and where the financial interest of the Commonwealth could be adversely affected if the discussion were made public at this time. And pursuant to Virginia Code section 2.2-3711A8 for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel regarding provisions in the agreement requiring legal advice. Additionally, I move that staff and attorney attend the closed session because their presence is deemed necessary and will aid the board in its consideration of this matter.
Do I have a second?
Second.
With that, Ms. Mathis, I will turn it over to you for a roll vote.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Dodson,
Yes.
Ms. Hines,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Kasperlet,
Yes.
Mr. Malvin,
Yes.
Mr. Merrill,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Smoot,
Yes.
Mr. Stinson,
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yes.
The roll is complete.
Thank you, Carol. So Carol, for the logistics, do you just want to let everyone know what we need to do to go into the closed session?
Certainly, everybody that should be in the closed session should have just received an email invite from me to log into that session. You will need to give us 1 or 2 minutes to open up that session before you'll be able to join.
Okay, so why don't we just take a, it's 11:17. Why don't we just take a, well, we could do a lunch break if we don't do that. Okay, we'll just wait a few minutes. We'll sign on. Should we all sign out of this, Carol?
Yes, you need to sign out of this. The session will still remain open. So after the closed session, we can rejoin.
We'll join this call. So everyone will sign off the meeting. We'll join the closed session. And when we return, we'll adjourn the workshop and we'll go action meeting. For those who are participating and listening and streaming this meeting, we do probably anticipate being back online about 12:30 to 12:45. I will ask Ms. Mathis to post the time on the website when we will reconvene.
We will do that.
Okay, I'm signing
Carol,
off.
Carol,
Okay.
Virginia is known for its beauty. With so much to love, from mountaintop adventures to coastal escapes, there's something to discover around every turn. Whether you're a local or a visitor, we want you to enjoy all that Virginia has to offer. But this beauty that surrounds us won't stay that way without your commitment to keep it clean. Virginia is for lovers, not litter. So when you're enjoying the views along our roadways, please remember to keep litter where it belongs so we can all enjoy the outdoors. Do your part and toss your trash in a recycling bin or trash can along the way. This is our Commonwealth, our community, our responsibility. Virginia is for lovers, not litter. Visit loversnotlitter.org to learn how you can pledge to keep Virginia litter-free.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. Excuse me. We are now going to take a roll call vote, and I ask each member to indicate their agreement with the following. To the best of my knowledge, during the closed meeting, the only matters heard, discussed, or considered were those matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only the public matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened. Ms. Mathis, could you take a roll call vote for members to indicate their agreement with that statement?
Yes. Mr. Brown.
Dodson?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, that's a yes for Mr. Dodson, but go ahead, Ms. Mathis.
Okay. Mr. Tunk.
Yeah.
Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kasperlet.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Malvin.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Merrill.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Stinson.
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yes.
Mr. Brown. I believe Mr. Brown's having a problem unmuting himself. Jen, can you unmute Mr. Brown?
I am working on it. It says request sent and will not let us unmute right now.
Ms. Mathis, I would just proceed.
Okay, the roll is complete.
Okay, thank you. With that, I am going to adjourn the workshop, and we will now commence with the action meeting. And with that, Mr. Tunk, I will turn it over to you.
In light of the continuing state of emergency declared by Governor Northam, where it is impractical or unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, I move that we adopt this agenda to take action to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operation of the Commonwealth Transportation Board.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mathis, will you take the roll call vote?
Yes. Mr. Yates. Mr. Stinson.
Yes.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Merrill. Mr. Malvin.
Yes.
Mr. Kasperlet.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Dodson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tunk.
Yes.
Mr. Brown. roll's complete.
Thank you, Carol. With that, I'm just going to remind everyone to please mute their lines. I will remind everyone that when you hit the space bar on your computer, it does unmute you or mute you. So if you do work on the computer during the time of a meeting, you can be going in and out and you won't even know it. So I just bring that to everyone's attention. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Hall.
Madam Secretary, at this time, we have nobody available for public comment.
Yes, and I understand we do have some. Okay. Is Justin monitoring the public comments for this as well?
Yes, ma'am, speaking. We do have one person has joined. That's Margaret Franklin. At this time, if you'd like to address the board, feel free to do so.
Hello, this is Supervisor Margaret Franklin from the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. I'm also joined by Supervisor Andrea Bailey, who also is a member of the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. We'll make it very brief, but we're here to speak in support of renaming Jefferson Davis Highway in Prince William County to Richmond Highway to make it consistent with the jurisdictions north of us. This was voted on by the board several months ago with a bipartisan vote, unanimous, and we're here asking that the CTB board also pass this measure. It's something that we've talked about in our community for a couple of years. We were finally able to do it. There was support for the community, and there's a plan to help our small businesses along the corridor to change their information over with the board support. So we don't foresee there to be any negative impact to doing this. So with that, I would just encourage you all to please pass this. Again, it was passed unanimous, bipartisan, in a bipartisan fashion. And now I'll turn it over to Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you, Supervisor
Franklin. I appreciate this opportunity. As Supervisor Franklin has said, this was a bipartisan, unanimous vote on the board, and we are very excited about this opportunity. I wanted to express my full support of renaming Jeff Davis Highway. It'll be something that is well past time and past due. The highway is currently named as a symbol of division throughout our communities, and it's a consistent reminder of our nation's dark and hurtful past. And we want to move on by renaming Jeff Davis Highway. We will send a strong message of diversity and inclusion and forward progress within our community. And this is not about removing history, but it's about progressing and focusing on how we collectively as a community can move forward throughout our community in a constructive manner. So again, I just want to show my support, and I am in full support of renaming Jeff Davis Highway. And I strongly encourage the CTB board to support the renaming as well. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you both so much for being here. Justin, is there?
Thank you all.
I can confirm that is the extent of the public caller queue.
Thank you, Justin. With that, do I have a motion on the minutes?
Moved.
Second.
Further discussion? Ms. Mathis, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Yates.
Yes.
Mr. Stinson.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Merrill. Mr. Malbin.
Yes.
Mr. Kasperwitz.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson. Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Dodson.
Yep.
Mr. Tunk.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
The roll's complete.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our district engineer in Hampton Roads, Chris Hall.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, good morning or good afternoon, Madam Secretary, members of the board. I'll be presenting for your action the resolution to authorize the commissioner to enter into a project agreement between VDOT and the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, or HRTAC, relating to segments 1, 4A, 4B, and 4C of the Hampton Roads Express Lane Network. These project agreements are to begin the advancement of preliminary engineering activities. As a reminder to the board members, you were briefed on the details of these actions at the last workshop meeting. And pending any questions, I would ask the board to move to approve this resolution.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion we approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Hello, yes, this is Allison. I had reached out to Nick, and I don't know if he's got an update on my question. But I had a question under the terms in section, I think it was C3, that VDOT does not have the right to cure in the event of a material breach of contract, but yet HRTAC does have that right. And I had just reached out to Nick questioning why it was not included for VDOT to have the right to cure in the event of a material breach of contract.
Nick, are you on the phone? First, I'll say, Mr. Tunk, that was a very good catch in that. That has been in there for a very long time with the Express Lane Network. Nick, are you on the line?
I am, yes.
Okay, do you want to address the issue?
Simply put, I have to concur with the comment that you made that was a very good catch on Mr. Tunk's part, and we have communicated with the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission this morning about amending the agreement to insert such language. We were not able to finalize the language since this was raised by Mr. Tunk, but we do have conceptual agreement to add in that provision, and so I believe Ms. Whitlock has an amended resolution that would provide an authority to the commissioner to make changes related to this particular issue after the board approves its execution.
Yes, Madam Secretary, if you, I believe on the screen here, you'll see at the last paragraph, oh, it was on the other screen. The last paragraph of the resolution, the now therefore clause, now includes an update from what had been sent to board members previously. And you'll see the very last line there. It says, provided that the commissioner works with HRTAC to include within each SPA a cure period with respect to any claimed material breaches by VDOT. So the agreement that's attached to the resolution today does not have that language in it, but the parties have agreed to that language. And as soon as they have that opportunity, they'll put the language into the agreement before it's signed.
Mr. Tunk, does that satisfy your concern?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
And Madam Chair,
I just really want to thank you so much because, you know, reading these documents, as we all do, those points can sometimes get lost. So I just really want to thank you for raising it. Yes, did someone want to speak?
yes, that was me and Nick, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank I recognize Director Page and HRTAC's counsel for working with us on a very short turnaround to try and address this issue. I think we started talking to them sometime yesterday afternoon, and then we're able to get a resolution to this sometime this morning. So I just wanted to express our gratitude to them for working with us on a short turnaround.
Not agree with you more. So, and Nick, thank you for your work, and Julie Whitlock from the Attorney General's office, and HRTAC for working with us this morning, or over the last 24 hours. So thank you all very much. With that, any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the resolution, please indicate your vote when Ms. Mathis calls the roll.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Tunk. Mr. Dodson.
Yes.
Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Kasperwitz,
Yes.
Mr. Malvin,
Yes.
Mr. Merrill, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Stinson,
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yes.
The roll's complete.
Thank you. Now we have Joanne Maxwell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. I am here to address the matter that you just heard referenced in the comments by both Supervisor Franklin as well as Supervisor Bailey. This matter seeks, Prince William County has passed a resolution asking the board to rename Route 1 in Prince William County from Jeff Davis Highway or Jefferson Davis Highway to Richmond Highway. The county has, pursuant to Section 33.2-213 of the Code of Virginia, passed a resolution in support of the naming, and they have also agreed to pay for the signage that's associated with such renaming. And with that being said, I am, this resolution that's before you would have the board approve that renaming.
Madam Secretary?
Ms. Hines.
I would move approval of this resolution and thank the Prince William Board of Supervisors for sending it our way. It makes the name of the road consistent now from the Potomac all the way to the edge of Northern Virginia.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes, Madam Secretary, I got a question.
Okay,
was a resolution entered into our packet? I didn't. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anything attached outside of the ball on the action.
Madam Chair, I would have to defer to Carol on that. A resolution was certainly attached to the packet that was submitted.
Ms. Mathis?
Yes, the resolution was attached. I'm happy to send this item around to all the board members.
Yeah, that'd be good. Since the information was sent late Friday night, I just didn't get to check it out.
We'll make sure a copy of that resolution. Are there any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask one other question. The supervisor said, I don't know what the feedback is.
Can you mute your phone?
I'm on our company computer, so my computer went down this morning. How about now, Steve? Is that okay now?
Joanne giving the feedback. Go ahead, Bert.
Okay. What occurs is that one of the supervisors was going to ask a question. Are you going to compensate the business owners who have their information line up as Jefferson Highway compared to Richmond Highway? Is there money being appropriated? Being a former local elected official, obviously this is a good resolution, but it's going to see if the business owners will be compensated for the and individuals living on this road, whoever the residential or business owners, will be compensated for the name change.
Madam Secretary, the chair of the board called me yesterday. They have worked pretty closely with everybody whose businesses are located along the highway, and they've got a plan. I don't know, Bert, whether it includes compensation or help with certain kinds of things. I will just say, when we did this change in Arlington a couple of years ago, the post office granted a period of transition so people could kind of use up their stationery and stuff. And so they recognized both addresses for a while for the businesses. So people didn't feel like they lost anything. And I don't know about Prince William, but up here, all the ways and map finding and everything made the transition with no difficulty. So people didn't feel that they lost business.
Thank you.
And one last question: how long, since I read resolution, how long is the road in Prince William County?
Madam Chair, it's approximately 12.3 miles.
Okay. And is it called Jeff Davis Highway when it gets south of Prince William, or is it still a Richmond Highway?
I believe it is Jeff Davis Highway in the next county. Would that be Stafford County? Hold on a sec. I can give you that information. But it is currently, will still be Jeff Davis Highway in the following counties: in Spotsylvania, in Fredericksburg, in Stafford, in Caroline County, and Richmond and Chesterfield. So it will still continue to be, we are only changing the name for that portion of the highway that is situated within Prince William County.
So Henrico County has already changed their name?
Madam Chair, yes. Henrico right now, Route 1 in Henrico County is currently known as Brook Road.
Oh, well, I didn't think they changed the name. I didn't know what part. I knew it was mostly Brook Road, but I didn't think it had the name Jeff Davis coming out of another county. Thank you.
Well, and this is Carlos, and the city of Richmond, I believe, has just passed a resolution to change it in the Richmond jurisdiction. In Hanover, it is Washington Highway. So just to add this commentary, the road has not had a uniform name in its entirety. So those individuals that would make the argument that it creates some kind of confusion, I think the mapping systems are all wise enough, and quite frankly, many of us know that it changes names as you go through the jurisdictions.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for that clarification. I would just like to offer my thanks as well to Prince William for presenting this name change and for working with us on this. I believe it's very important. With that, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye or yes when the roll call is called. Ms. Magnus?
Mr. Brown,
It's an honor to say aye.
Mr. Tunk,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson,
Yes.
Ms. Hines,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Kasprowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Malbin,
Aye.
Mr. Merrill, Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Yates.
Aye.
The roll's complete.
Thank you. Ms. Pryor?
Good afternoon, Madam Secretary, members of the board. I have 2 items for your consideration today. And Madam Secretary, normally you take these together, and I'll present them both. And if you want to take them together, we can do that today.
Thank you. Unless there's an objection, I will present it as a block vote.
The first item is my normal monthly transfers. You'll notice they are especially voluminous this month, and that's just simply related to the fact that we amended the transportation alternative and SGR paving projects last month, and these are the transfers associated with those actions. And the second item is the amendment of one project to the 6-year program. It is a toll integration infrastructure project related to the Hampton Roads Express Lane Segment 3. And I recommend your approval of both.
Madam Secretary, I so move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye when the roll call is called.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Tunk,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson,
Aye.
Mr. Hines, Ms. Hines, my apologies.
That's okay, Carol. Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Kasprowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Malbin,
Aye.
Mr. Merrill, Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Yates.
Aye.
The roll is complete.
Thank you, Carol. With this, we have Lori Snyder again. Unless there is opposition, I will take this as a block vote. Oh, it's Ms. Snyder. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Secretary and board members. I have 2 items today, and both of them are to request approval for the commissioner to enter into special use permits, both of them with the National Park Service. These are very similar to an item that was presented last month, and also an item that I presented back in February. And each of the permits would allow VDOT to enter onto National Park Service lands for construction and maintenance purposes. The first item is specifically to replace the North Glebe Road Bridge over Pemmon Run Creek in the George Washington Memorial Parkway lands. And the second one is for the intersection of Route 29 and 234, and would allow VDOT to perform any maintenance that would be required in that intersection. With the approval of these resolutions, once the existing special use permit would expire, it would also allow the commissioner to execute further permits specific to these 2 locations only. VDOT has looked at these, and we recommend your approval.
Madam Secretary, I move approval of these 2 resolutions.
Mr. Kaspowitz?
This is Mr. Johnson. I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to bring in our Northern Virginia partners. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye or expressing your opposition. Thank you. Ms. Mathis, I turn it over to you.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Tunk,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson,
Aye.
Ms. Hines,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Kasprowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Malvin,
Aye.
Mr. Merrill, Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Yates.
Aye.
The roll's complete.
Thank you. Jeremy Latimer.
Good afternoon, Madam Secretary and members of the board. I'm presenting an action item for Eastern Engineered Wood Products is a rail industrial access program applicant for $385,000 for a rail spur in Charlotte County. They are a company headquartered in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, with current operations in Emporia. They would be relocating 7 employees and adding 7 employees and planning to run 100 rail cars annually. They scored 58 points, and staff does recommend approval.
Mr. Dodson.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Secretary, Jeremy and myself met a few weeks ago with individuals at the site. It's a great opportunity for economic expansion. Charlotte County is a small county, around 12,000 people, but they do have a lot of timber in that area. And the people were really gracious about it. And Jeremy, you can say that the reason they're moving from Emporia is because that rail line to their site in Emporia, I believe, is not used very much now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. So I would move approval for the expansion of the company, please.
Second.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Greg.
Oh, thank you. Any further discussions? All those in favor, please indicate your vote with Ms. Mathis.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Tunk,
Aye.
Mr. Dodson,
Aye.
Ms. Hines,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Kasprowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Malden,
Aye.
Mr. Merrill, Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Stinson,
Aye.
Mr. Yates.
Aye.
The roll's complete.
Thank you, Ms. Mathis. Commissioner, I'm just verifying with you that we don't have any bids to present today. I take that as a yes. Under new business, I will simply share with all of you that Mr. Donahue is back from his first 2 weeks of paternity leave. He will be taking the remainder of his time either during or after the General Assembly session. So we're grateful to have him back at this moment. I will let you all know that there is a new Donahue in the world, Murphy. So Murphy joins his little brother Barney, his big brother Barney. And so we just really wish our best to Nick and Devin, Barney, and Murphy. We're happy to have a new member of our team. And for me personally, I just really want to thank you. It's been a very challenging year. I said to my dad recently, who just turned 89, you know, it's going to be interesting, and I look forward to looking back on this year, looking back and looking at all the lessons that we have learned through this. My dad did say, I hope I'm able to look back on this year. But anyway, just many times, and I thank you for your patience dealing with the technology, being very flexible about adjusting your schedules to accommodate the special session and budgets and special budget amendments, trying to help us navigate this. And so it's really this board that's been empowered with the flexibility to help the Commonwealth navigate this. And while we live at this time of uncertainty, I do believe that we are making at this moment the smartest decisions that we can. And it's all because of all of you. And I just thank you for your service. I thank Mr. Merrill for his willingness to join us. And I wish you and your families a very happy Thanksgiving, as I do for all who are with us today and streaming and participating in the meeting. With that, does anyone have anything to add?
This is Mr. Johnson, Madam Secretary. I just want to confirm the December meeting.
Yes. Ms. Mathis, do you want to confirm that?
Yes, our December meeting is scheduled for December 9th. It's going to be a one-day virtual meeting, and that is a Wednesday, the same logistics. We will open the WebEx at 8:30 and start the meeting at 9.
Thank you very much for your confirmation.
Can we end with the Christmas party, Carol? We need it.
Sure.
Oh
we
my
sure,
God,
we
yes,
sure do.
I guess bring your own beverages. Huh?
Yes, yes. But anyway, thank you all so much. Oh, Mr. Miller, did you want to say something?
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Here,
Happy
here.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Be safe, whatever.